Today on Locked On Red Wings, which Atlantic Division teams could be the biggest risers and which could be the biggest fallers?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily J, a WWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And on today's episode, guys, we're going to take a look around the Atlantic Division, Red Wings included, and try and just get a vibe of whether or not which teams could be risers or fallers in the upcoming season. And like usual, we're probably going to be very wrong. I'm going to try and, I'm going to try my best to stay away from Boston with a 100-foot pole, because I feel like every year I predict them to fall and every year they're right there, but we will try our best regardless. Scotty, how you doing? Happy Wednesday. Tarek Skubal was great last night.
He was, had 2 nights ago, if it's Wednesday, but yes, he was solid, man. Yeah, this Angels series is, I don't think the Tigers fans really realize how massive of a series this is for the Angels. Like they are at a point where they need to pretty much win every game if they want to buy at the deadline and not trade a generational player. So it's like, we're where we're at. Everybody's pretty aware of where we're at, but is a massive series for our opponent, so that makes it kind of exciting.
Yes, it does. Over here in Red Wings land, though,
episode inspired by a retirement, by the way.
It is. That's a great point. Patrice Bergeron of the Boston Bruins has announced his retirement. It feels like he's been on the verge of retirement for 3 straight years. Comes back, wins the Selke. So it was one of those situations where I wasn't going to believe it until I saw it. But he has retired. Seems like David Krejci is pretty much gone too. And so that, again, like you said, Scott, it kind of inspired this conversation of will they fall finally? And I'm not so sure. They might fall a little bit, but I don't think they're going to fall to the point where they're going to miss the playoffs. So I guess, if you want, we can start with the Boston conversation since they inspired it. Scotty, do you think Boston will finally slide?
So, yes, but slide from 135 points, not slide to being a bad hockey team. You know what I mean? They're in an interesting position where they can slide, and honestly, there's an argument that they could drop 20 points and still be the best team in the NHL next year. You know how crazy that is? That's how much better they were than everybody else. They, 135? I'm pretty sure 115 would have led hockey last season. They could literally drop 20 points and still be more than fine and still be more than fine. They'd still be one of the best teams in the league. So I'm not going into this season expecting them to put up 135 and did they hit 130 in goal differential, or did they fall just short? I know that was a thing as we're heading into the end of the season.
I actually don't know. I don't have that statistic up in front of me.
But they ended on an 8-game winning. They're bound to not repeat a 135 season, a record-breaking historic season. But I think that's what makes this division honestly the most interesting, is that fact. The Boston is I think still going to be good. I don't expect them to go from where they were at last season, and even with the people that they've lost, just turn around and be even really a straight up wild card team or certainly miss the postseason. I'm not expecting that at all. But they can lose a lot of points, still be one of the best teams in the NHL, and that leaves a lot of wins on the table for other people, obviously, especially in their own division, in this division, to have some wiggle room to take some steps forward, as opposed to Boston just absolutely steamrolling literally everybody they played.
Yeah, I think Boston's in a really weird spot. Like you said, I expect them to slide, but I don't think they're going to slide as much as people might think. They were up against the cap regardless, so making big signings was kind of always off the table. Their biggest departures, as we've kind of already covered, like they lost Tyler Bertuzzi, they lost David Krejci, they lost Patrice Bergeron, huge losses for sure. But they still have guys like Brad Marchand, David Pasternak, Jake DeBrusk. They got really good guys up and down, and then they have probably the best goalie tandem in the league. They signed some guys to like 1-year deals, like Kevin Shattenkirk at one point, like one of the better defenders in the league. 34 years old, signed him to a 1-year deal. Like they got some James Van Riemsdyk. They got some good veteran presences.
Win now mode for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean they have to with some of the guys that they got.
Right.
I think that they are still going to be a playoff team. I think they'll might be like a third in the division wild card one. So I guess you would consider them a faller. But like you said, Scotty, not so far as to say they're going to be like not a threat anymore. I mean, I still think if you look at this roster, it's probably better than the Detroit Red Wings roster through and through. I mean, from goalie to top end talent, like there's a gap still to be had.
For sure. Yeah. And that's my biggest thing is like they can still be really effective, still be one of the better teams in this division, still be one of the better teams in the entire league, but also give other teams the opportunities to win some more hockey games and not hog all of the points. So yeah, I think that's kind of where I think we're pretty much lockstep there. I fully expect them to slide from a historic season, but I also fully expect them to still be one of the better teams in this division. And
Yeah, absolutely. Is there what other player or what team do you want to go to next, Scotty?
We can just go in order of last season standings. We can go Toronto.
Okay, sure. If you want to go to Toronto next, I ask you the same question, man. Do you expect them to be a riser or a faller?
Maybe I shouldn't have picked them. They're a bleep show, dude, and like it's so difficult because obviously this is like strictly a regular season conversation. Like what they do in the postseason every year does not matter to the Red Wings' odds of making the playoffs, right? So like I don't expect them to like slide hard. No, they obviously they lost some pieces, but they also added like some pieces, right? Like I mean, Bert's there now, obviously, and whatnot, but I don't expect them to take. They won 50 games last year. I don't expect them to slide too terribly hard. I still expect them to be well over 100 points, one of, if not the best team in the Atlantic. And the playoffs are the playoffs. So no, I guess not really. But it also wouldn't surprise me if they, I don't know, shaved off 5 to 10 points even. That's still an 100-point team. But like,
yeah, I mean,
don't know.
Their biggest loss, obviously, was Michael Bunting, losing him, losing Ryan O'Reilly after they acquired him in the trade, but that was always going to be the case.
Yeah.
But then they go ahead and they re-sign David Kampf to an extension, a guy I really liked, who I was hoping would hit the free agent market. They re-signed Samsonov, who, I mean, their biggest issue for a long time was defense and goaltending. They had the top-end scoring talent. Samsonov was great in the regular season last year, played 40-some games, had like a .919 save percentage, wasn't so great in the playoffs, but, you hope that maybe will come with more playoff experience. Although he played with Washington before, so he should have, a handful of playoff experience over there. So, I mean, you hope that they can, you don't hope, we're Red Wings fans, we don't hope that they're good, but if you're a Toronto fan, you hope that, with the added strength that they got, like they signed Wayne Simmons and Ryan Reeves and Tyler Bertuzzi to a 1-year contract, who's their biggest acquisition, that maybe they're a tougher team, and Max Domi, oh my God, like they added a ton of physicality. It's crazy to their organization. That maybe like this is the year that they, can hang in the playoffs. But you're talking regular season wise, Scotty, points wise, I think they're probably around the same. I think points wise, they're not going to move that much. I think they might rise in the division because Boston slides. They might get the first place divisional spot. But I think, they had over 100 points this year. I expect them to have over 100 points next year. I think they're going to still be in that conversation. They're still going to be a really good team. They still have Austin Matthews, William Nylander, and Mitch Marner for now. And that's the biggest what if about this conversation regarding the Toronto Maple Leafs. They are currently, Scotty, $12 million over the cap. They have, if you consider their LTIR candidates, they're still almost $7 million over the cap. So like they have to make a move here, especially as contract negotiations start to heat up with William Nylander and Austin Matthews. Like they're gonna have to move some people to make cap space. And I think it was Tree Living that said that they're gonna have to like lock their finance guy in a room so he can figure it out, because this roster as it stands should be first in the division, but who knows what the roster is going to look like after they finally clear their cap space, because they have to. They're literally impossible to. I mean, they're at 23 guys on the roster as of right now. I think they got all their RFAs signed except for Liljurgen. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I think that even with those signings. Or with those trades that they might have to make, they're probably still going to be a divisional contender. I don't see them rising or sliding all that much.
Yeah, completely agree. I expect a similar regular season product for sure.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll continue this conversation on risers and fallers in the Atlantic Division. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All in an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We're talking about the risers and fallers in the Atlantic Division, or who we think might be risers and fallers. Scotty, third place in the Atlantic Division, the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think this is an interesting conversation. I think that they could be fallers.
I am with you. Very lockstep. I am very much I guess this kind of makes me bad at
your job.
Okay. Well, bad at some people agree with you. Bad at predictions or projections. But I am very much like I have to, I don't want to say like see it to believe it, but there's a lot of things that, like people ask me all the time and they're like, oh, like can this person turn into this, or like, can this, and I'm like, I don't know. Like I kind of need to see some evidence of that, right? And to me, while I fully agree with you that Tampa Bay is going to slide and continue, because they've kind of been just on a sliding trajectory for the last 3 years now. I also am not at a point where like I'm going to be like, oh, Tampa Bay's not a playoff team anymore. Like that's very much still like until I see some evidence and like some real cracks in the armor, I think I'm going to stay away from anything that drastic. But I mean, they were under 100 points last year, and I don't think they did anything in the offseason rather, to kind of turn that downward trajectory that they've been on over the last 24 months around.
Yeah, I mean, like this is still a really, really good hockey team through and through. I think that it's just the age factor, as I call it, is starting to catch up with them a little bit. I mean, Nikita Kucherov has hit 30 now. Steven Stamkos is in his mid-30s. Yeah. I mean, Braden Point had a 50-goal season, and he's only 27. So they definitely still have some youth. But Victor Hedman's 32. Like a lot of their core, a lot of the guys who were the guys for them are finally starting to get older. Not trying to say Nikita Kucherov's going to suddenly not be any good at because he's 30 years old. Like he still has 3 or 4 years probably ahead of him of very good hockey. But eventually it does start to happen. And we saw it last year where they didn't hit 100 points. And maybe they do hit up 100 points again this year with Boston maybe not being as good. They steal some of those points back. But they're also over the cap. They're $7 million over the cap. And yeah, Brent Seabrook is going to go on the LTIR. Like that's going to happen. Brent Seabrook's not playing hockey. But they're still going to be nearly $70,000 over the cap when that happens. And they've lost some players this offseason that were pretty damn good, but they hadn't really signed anybody to really replace those guys. Like they got Luke Glendening, whom I love. He'll be, fourth line center, PK guy. I love that for them.
Absolute dog.
I don't see what they see in Tanner Jeannot. I just don't see it, but it is what it is. Alex Killorn left, and that's going to be a decently sized blow to them.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of their guys who walked away and a lot of the guys they signed aren't going to kill you like to have lost, and they're not going to be a huge help to have gained.
Right.
The core is still there. It's just the fact that core is starting to get older that I think they're going to slide a little bit. Now, I mean, some projections have them maybe being a wild card team, but maybe they might be fighting with Boston for D3 division spot 3 and wild card 1, or maybe I don't know. I hesitate to say anything. It's like the Boston effect. Like I hesitate to say anything worse than wild card 1 because I've been so wrong in the past, and I think they're still way too good of a team to like be down there slugging it out with like Buffalo, who could be.
Yeah, we'll get into it in a sec. That's a scary team. But yeah, I'm with you. I think that this division over the next 24 months, right? The next 2 years is going to be absolutely fascinating because you're going to have the rise of the teams that have been in the bottom for the last like 3 or 4 or 5 years and the fall of the teams that have been at the top for the last 3, 4, 5 years. And I think for at least one season, if not 2, it's just going to be an absolute slugfest of like ever like okay, like one's falling, one's rising, and we're all around the same for like a year maybe while that kind of handoff is happening. And I think that there could be a lot of dogfights, and I think Tampa Bay is probably going to be a part of a lot of those dogfights and kind of grind it out end of the season, hold your breath type of moments. But I also could see, again, I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I also could see like next season, maybe like a hard fall off of a team like Tampa. They one injury and a retirement or two, and that, you know what I mean? That's a quick fall off. But as it stands for this fall, I fully expect them to still have over 90 points and still be a big time, player in this division and a playoff team.
Yeah, and that brings us to fourth in our division. That was Florida, right?
Yeah, super fascinating conversation yet again.
I think that this could be a riser, but I think they could be a riser, but I don't think they're going to be President's Trophy winning levels risers. I think that the highest of the highs is when they won the President's Trophy with Huberdeau and Weegar. I think the lowest of the lows, in air quotes, I mean, they made it to the Stanley Cup final, but in terms of regular season was slugging it out for that final wild card spot. I think that team is going to find consistency and stability, and I think that team is set up, especially because they didn't really lose anyone of huge note in this in this free agency. At least I'm looking over, everyone that all the guys who they've lost and they've gained. And it's another situation like Tampa where they didn't lose anyone big time. I mean, Radko Gudas is probably their biggest loss, and that is a blow. But they didn't also gain anyone of like huge note. It's mostly the same. Like the core of that team remained the same. And Matthew Tkachuk, it's going to be another year under the new coaching staff. Like I think that the team's going to find consistency because that was the biggest thing. Like that team suffered a huge shakeup, and they still made it to the wild card and then made it to the Stanley Cup final. And I do understand that a big part of their success was Bobrovsky got hot at the right time. And I don't think Bobrovsky is going to be that good all season because he's just shown to be a super inconsistent goalie. But I think that roster makeup is good enough to, launch itself into fighting for that 2-3 divisional spot. So as of right now, it's like, okay, we got Toronto at 1, Florida fighting out for 2-3, and then you got Tampa and Boston fighting out for 3 wild card 1, probably in the way I'm viewing it in my mind right now.
Yeah, I do agree with you that I think Florida is a riser. I don't know if I have them as a riser to like the levels of winning the division again. I think in my head it's more of like Toronto will just take the 1.
Yeah, like I said, 2-3.
Right, almost like by default, and then the other 3 I kind of have like lumped together instead of like 2 and 2. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is a really good hockey team, and I think we talked with Armando a lot last year, right? And the host of Locked On Panthers, and when we talked to him, he mentioned the same thing a lot, and he said it's a huge shakeup. They are having a hard time kind of finding their consistency, and obviously they found it, in the postseason and made a huge, great run. But I'm kind of expecting this team to, without any huge shakeup this offseason, coming off of a cup where they know what they can do when they're at their best. I'm kind of expecting this core that surprised so many to be a lot better in the regular season this fall.
Well, and the big question here too is like, when will Aaron Ekblad return, and
Sure.
at what level of competitiveness will he return at too? Because he was really banged up at the end of that playoff run. So, I mean, he had, I think, shoulder surgery and multiple other injuries as well. But I mean, that's a huge part of their defensive core. Like, he's their number one defenseman on the right side. So it's going to be curious for sure. But I mean, they're a team that, as of right now, as of July 25th, as we're recording this, they have one forward who's 30 years old. Everyone else is under 30. Like, that's crazy. They're a crazy young team with a lot of potential. And Barkov and Kachuk, I think that's just going to be a good hockey team. Carter Verhaeghe, I think that they're going to be in that 2-3 conversation. Not President's Trophy winner caliber good, but they're going to be like in that divisional mix for sure.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm fully expecting a top 3 divisional finish out of them, I think, which I feel like maybe I've just said about 4 teams, but
yeah, I mean, it's a tough division to predict.
That's kind of where
that's
we're
why
at.
we're trying to do it as risers and fallers, and that's why maybe the best way of saying it. No, I sneezed.
Yeah, but you dabbed.
I didn't mean to dab. That was an accident.
But you did. It was kind of hard.
All right. You're getting me off topic. But I mean, as of right now, we have Boston as a slight faller, Tampa as a slight faller, Toronto kind of staying pat, probably a slight riser in the divisional standings, but points remaining the same. Florida as a riser. And then when we come back in segment 3, we're going to try and get through the last 4 teams real quick because we're really bad at being brief. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. We always do this. We always end up having to like crush the last half of our episode into one segment because we're so bad at being brief. But next up comes the Ottawa Senators. And
some of these are short conversations.
I'll be honest, Scotty. I mean, I could see them being a faller. Is
Really?
that wild for me to say?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, I look at what they did this offseason, and I don't think they did anything to make their roster that much better. They lost to Brinkett, so they definitely lost a player of quality. And like, they were, 5th in the division this last year? I just feel like this offseason was kind of spinning the wheel for them. I'm trying to bring up their transaction log to double check on that to see if I maybe am forgetting about a major transaction that they made, because apparently I did not have that tab open before we started recording. I had all the other ones open. Please forgive me.
Well, I'll say my piece about Buffalo. I'm kind of sour. Huh?
Buffalo?
I
thought I was talking about Ottawa.
Oh, sure. Buffalo finished 5th in the division. Ottawa was 6th. But like, we can do Ottawa. Sure.
That was my bad. That's my bad.
That's fine. We can absolutely do Ottawa.
I had it twisted in my head.
So, well, Buffalo, I think, is a fascinating conversation. But so let's go to Ottawa. I mean, everyone compares these two teams, right? Everybody and their mothers compare the Ottawa Senators and the Detroit Red Wings. Obviously, there was a big trade made between the two teams this offseason as well, which certainly fueled that fire. On top of that, I'm kind of with you, man. It's just like for the last 3 years, we've been hearing about like the rise of the Sens, and they never win like any hockey games before December 1st, which like doesn't help them ever. But like B, I mean, what did they do this offseason to like really, like, they traded away a top end goal scorer? Obviously had a disappointing year for them, but like they traded away one of their better goal scorers still. And like, what? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like that trade, not that that's like the signal that they're gonna, I don't know, like blow it up and just start rebuilding entirely. But I feel like this is kind of I don't know if you just said this, but I feel like this is kind of the last hurrah for the Sens. Like, I feel like if they're like this core, at least, like I almost feel like if they really struggle again, I'm not really sure how much more patience there is with the current core that they have.
I think it's more of a growing impatience with the general manager than it is the head coach than it is the core. I think they have a good collection of talent. I really do. Like Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stutzel's really good. I think Brandstrom's really good. The problem that they have is that they can never bring it together. every year they just struggle to bring
Right,
it
and I guess
together.
that's
And
my
last year
point.
they beat up on the Red Wings. That is a fact.
Yeah.
But I think as long as that general manager and that coaches are in charge, I mean, it's not going to change. And I think that with other teams taking steps forward in the division, I think that they're going to get steps past. And I hope my Red Wings are one of those teams. But like I can't, and they'll cry that they were injury plagued all last year. And yeah, they were, but guess what? So was every other NHL team. Like the Red Wings lost Tyler Bertuzzi for the bulk of the season because he broke his hand twice, and that's one of their biggest offensive play drivers.
Yeah.
So it's like that happens to every single NHL team. So you can't use injuries as an excuse as to why your team's underperforming because good teams figure it out. It's just facts. So I think they have a really good core. I think they could be a really good hockey team, but I think as long as Pierre Dorian is in charge, I think as long as their head coach is their head coach, like nothing's gonna change. That needs I think it less than a core shakeup. I think it needs a front office shakeup to really bring that team to the next level. And I can't see them taking a step forward past fifth in the division until they get that new voice in the locker room and in that chair upstairs.
Sure, yeah, and then they ended with 86 points. Florida was the lowest point total playoff team in this division with 92. Like they were certainly in the mix. I mean, at the trade deadline, we obviously all remember that back to back, but they were in the mix for a majority of the season and just kind of fell flat. And I don't think that they're gonna be like awful. I don't expect Ottawa to take like some massive step backwards, but I guess honestly, in my brain, like I kind of expect kind of a copy and paste in terms of like maybe not point total, but in terms of like season like outlook. Like I kind of expect them to be on the outside looking in come April and coming the postseason, but they'll hang around. They'll certainly win some games. I'm sure they'll beat the Wings at some point. Like I still think that the like you said, like the collection of talent that they have is good, but I don't know, at some point like you actually have to take the step forward that everybody's been talking about that you're supposed to have taken for the last 3-4 years now.
Yep, agreed. Now let's move on to the actual fifth place team in the division, the Buffalo
This
Sabres.
I think is a fascinating conversation. I want to start it if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to ask you, like, do you think they were legit?
So yeah, 91 points last season. Florida, the worst team to make the playoffs, 92 points. So the definition of barely making the playoffs got eliminated, I believe, on the last game of the regular season. Even though they ended on a W2. But yeah, there are just a lot of like underlying like stats that really worry me about Buffalo. Like I think Tage Thompson is genuinely one of the most talented players in the entire NHL. And
yeah, he's legit.
Yeah, he's absolutely ridiculous. And like intangibles, we talk about all the time. Like he certainly has a closet full of them. But like a couple of them that really jump out at me. One, despite winning 42 regulation wins, 33 regulation losses, negative goal differential on the year, a little weird. But the biggest one to me is honestly their home and road record. Does this sound sustainable to you? A team that was 1 point out of the postseason, despite being 17, 20, and 4 at home and 25 and 13 on the road. That is
Jesus.
quite literally the second best road record in the entire division. Like in the entire division, the only team with a better road record was the Boston Bruins in the entire Atlantic.
Wow.
Like that's absurd, right? That's a huge string of success away from home and an under 500 hockey team at home. Like that's really strange, I think is one word.
Yeah.
But you really like sustainability in something like that really like rears its ugly head, like and has to be the forefront of the conversation. Like not that those, that's not like some crazy analytic and not something that is like the end all be all. Certainly, I mean, clearly it's possible. Again, they were a point away from the playoffs this year, but like that's I don't like that. You need to win at home more. Like you need to, if you really want to like establish yourself. And like the Red Wings were better at home than the Buffalo Sabres. Like you need to be better on home ice. And I don't know. Like I'm not sure I see again, with their offseason as well, similar to Ottawa, I'm not really sure I saw a bunch that would dramatically change the outlook that I have for this team. Certainly better than they were like 2 years ago, surprised everybody last year. But with a lot of other teams, as you said, kind of already carving out roles for them and positions in the playoffs, I still think that Buffalo's probably on the outside looking in.
That's an interesting. I don't know, man. They're tough.
They're
I
really
think
tough. Yeah. I don't feel
I
confident about anything I just said. So
I think that they're a team that if goaltending can, because goaltending is a huge issue for them. They had their best goalie was Craig Anderson in 26 games played at a 908 save percentage. Did he finally retire? He didn't resign, did he?
who?
Let me double check on that. Craig Anderson.
Oh, geez.
He
Oh,
became an unrestricted. He's not with them anymore. But like their goaltending was
I don't remember
subpar
if there was
all
a
season
retirement tweet
long.
about him. I feel like there might have been.
And then but they have such a great young core: Rasmus Dahlin,
They
Owen
do.
Power, Tage
Fantastic.
Thompson,
Dahlin's phenomenal
Alex
too. Yep.
Talk, Cousins. Like they have so many good players on that hockey team. I think that they're a legitimate playoff threat. Like I think I don't know. I think they're a riser. I don't know how much they're rising though. I mean, like it's so tough.
A riser from 91 points is pretty much a playoff team.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think that they can be a playoff contender. Like they're a playoff team. I do think that. It's just, is this for real? That's my one thing. Like, did it 1 year after being bad for so long? Can they do it again?
So that's right. And that's I think that this is like the perfect candidate for like a
back to reality.
85 to 90 point season this year. And then next off season, they take the push way more seriously and go out and get some more like impact players in free agency. Their core is still so young. 2 years from now, they'll still be really good. And I think that season is maybe like, okay, now we're poised to take like the really big step, but not like even a back to reality thing. I think very highly of the Buffalo Sabres. I don't want anything I said to come across as like slander to their core. They really proved a lot of people wrong and really showed out this year. It's just I question the linear growth of the team, I guess is what I'm saying, not the talent.
That's fair. Scotty, let's move on. We're already over 30 minutes. We got 2 more teams to get to, and one of them is our own. So I'm sure there's going to be some.
Let's save the Wings for last because Montreal, I think, is just going to be the worst team in this division again.
I think so, and I think that's going to be by design. Although I will say caveat here is they're accruing a very good pool, and I think
3 to 5 years from now, on the rise.
The biggest question mark is their drafting and whether or not drafting Juraj Slafkowski and David Reinbacher in back-to-back years when there were arguably better players on the board given their position is going to pay off. But if they pay off, they're going to look like geniuses. But if they don't, they're going to be like, what are we doing here?
Right.
But yeah, I think worse in the division. Detroit Red Wings. Can they make the jump? We just talked about 5 teams who are going to be in the mix for a playoff spot, we think. Can the Red Wings be the 6th team in the division to be in the mix?
Right, that's the thing, man. Like, I'm pretty sure if I go back and listen to what I just said, I'm pretty sure I just said, and I will say it again with the Wings, that they very much should have the expectation of trying to be a playoff team this year. And that I'm pretty sure I said something along those lines for 7 of 8 teams in this division. Right. So I guess maybe I said Ottawa would take a step back, but like this is a big year, man. Like this is a really big year. We've been talking about it for a while. Obviously, we talk about it every single episode. So, yes, they should absolutely be a riser from 80 points. Like they were by the end of the season, they were comfortably in a tier below Ottawa and Buffalo, who were 91 and 86 points. Right, like you absolutely should be in a position to close the gap there. I think there's a legitimate conversation for leapfrogging Ottawa. And that puts you in the conversation of, can you leapfrog Ottawa and Buffalo and put yourself in a position to, if you want to be a top 4 team, pass one of Boston, Toronto, Tampa, Florida, like, I don't think it's impossible, but it's certainly not, even though, the DeBrincat trade happened, we were all excited and talking about like playoffs should be the expectation for the fan base. I don't disagree with that, a couple of weeks removed from that, like I don't disagree with what I said there, but it should not be like it's guaranteed either. Like that, this is a large step that is in front of them to go from 80 points and the second worst team in this division to what, 90, 92?
Yeah. But Buffalo did it last year.
Spot.
Buffalo jumped like 13 points from the year before. It is possible. I mean, Derek Lalonde said that it's hard to do, and he's right, but it is possible. And I do think Detroit is a riser in the division, and I do think they should have their set sight on the playoffs. But again, we just look at the division as a whole, and you just think it's really hard to make a wave in that company. I think Alex DeBrinket's going to help a lot. I think all the offside, as much as people like to clown on the additions the Red Wings made as being mediocre players, they're mediocre players who are going to be playing depth roles. Like that doesn't sound like a compliment, but I mean it as a compliment. Like they didn't sign these guys to be big time players. They signed these guys to make their depth really good. And I think these guys are going to make their depth really good. I think JT Compher is going to make the forward depth really good. Daniel Sprong's going to make the forwards better. Costin and Fisher are going to make the forwards better. Like these are guys who are going to help the team be more consistent on the back end, while DeBrincat, Larkin, Raymond, and Perron help score goals. So I think this team's got a lot to work with this year, especially with some of the guys they have who are NHL ready that could push for a playoff or a roster spot. This team could, I think they will jump Ottawa, and I think they could jump Buffalo, but it's just going to be really tough. I make no guarantees with anyone that we've set on this list. This is just gut feeling stuff. Like, this is why it's not a standings prediction. We'll do standings prediction later after Toronto gets all their crap figured out with the cap. But like, I mean, I guess that's really it. Like Detroit, it's almost like I'm at a point now with the Red Wings where it feels, for me, it's not like they should, but almost like they have to be a team that takes a jump, because they can't get caught in the middle, man. You can't get caught in the middle, because then you're never going to make your team that much better drafting 15th, Yeah,
no, this is and like in the middle for me, like there's a difference between like if we do what Buffalo did and like we miss the playoffs by a point. I think that's a lot different than being like, 87 points. Oh, you took kind of a step forward, but you still clearly have a long way to go type of thing. Like there's a big difference between those two situations. So I'm with you. And yeah, when you say they have to, like, yeah, you're right. If after this offseason they still finish 7th, like that's a huge issue. That's a problem. So they have done everything in their power, I think, to take that step forward, and we'll see, man.
So overall, guys, just to give you a clean break, the risers, and again, risers and fallers doesn't mean they're going to be first and worst in the division. It's just teams we think are going to take a step forward, teams that are going to take a step back, no matter how minimal or giant that's going to be. Florida, we think, is going to take a step forward. Buffalo, we think, is going to take a step forward. Detroit, we think, is going to step forward. Toronto and Montreal, we think, overall kind of going to stay pat. Again, the stipulation on Toronto is like they might take a step forward in the division, but points-wise probably remain the same. Boston, Tampa, we think are going to take a slight step back, so a slight fall. And Ottawa, we think, is going to fall, at least in terms of standings. Maybe not points, but standings-wise, probably a little bit, because we expect Detroit to take a jump forward in this season coming up. Scotty, good conversation. Any final thoughts?
We ball.
We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Oh, no, sorry, Friday. I'm going to have to get used to that as we're in off-season mode. So stay tuned. Same time, same place, to your team every day.
Every day.